The gas station country is on fire under relentless drone attacks.
The entire oil refinery is on fire. Everything is burning.
Strikes hit oil refineries and Putin's budget.
The money is running out.
Putin has less and less cash to fund his war. And the Russian army is facing a fuel crisis.
Reserves will soon be depleted, and no fresh supplies are coming.
Oil is the blood of war. When Russia is drained dry, when will Putin finally be forced to stop this war? How are the US and the EU joining the campaign against Russia's oil industry? And how many more strikes on Russian refineries is the Ukrainian army preparing? Watch the special report, Explosive Sanctions, How Strikes on Refineries Are Forcing Putin to Peace. Putin has been hit where it hurts most, and the blows keep coming. And again. And again. In recent months, Ukrainian drones have struck 13 oil refineries across the European part of Russia. The Syzran refinery.
The whole plant is on fire. Look, everything's burning.
The Volgograd refinery hit. The Saratov refinery hit.
Got it. Direct hit on the oil depot.
The refinery in Ukhta and another one in Samara, 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine.
Damn, this is insane. Snezhana, look what's happening.
The Krasnodar refinery.
It's blazing like crazy.
The Ryazan refinery.
They've reached the Ryazan plant, too.
The Afipsky refinery. The Ilsky refinery.
Unbelievable.
And now, the refinery in Ufa is burning, nearly 1,500 kilometers from Ukraine. Ukrainian drones have struck a refinery in the city of Kirishi, Leningrad region, one of the largest in Russia. Also hit the Neftekhim Salavat plant in the Republic of Bashkortostan, 1,400 kilometers from Ukraine, and another strike on the Novoshakhtinsk refinery in the Rostov region. People felt the heat of the fire from kilometers away.
Wow.
6 fuel storage tanks have been destroyed here.
That's it. Those tanks caught fire, too.
To fight the blaze, authorities cut off the water supply to an entire city of 35,000 people. But even that didn't help. The fire raged for 5 days, and only after the damaged tanks had completely burned out did Russian officials announce that the fire was under control. Some refineries have been hit multiple times. For example, explosions at the Saratov refinery thundered in January, February, August, and twice in September of this year. In total, in 2025, Ukrainian drones carried out 29 successful strikes on Russian oil refineries. These attacks came as a real shock to Russia's oil industry. At many facilities, the primary oil processing units were damaged or completely destroyed. And without those units, further refinery operations are impossible. Restoring them is extremely difficult. Many of the necessary components are unavailable, even in China. They can only be sourced from Western countries. Ukrainian strikes have disabled at least 20% of Russia's oil refining capacity. Some refineries were forced to halt operations. Many others are still running below capacity, producing far less gasoline than before. As a result, Russia is now facing a fuel shortage. It has already affected more than 20 regions across the country, not only those near Ukraine, but also thousands of kilometers away from the front line. Fuel problems have hit Transbaikal, Yakutia, Samara region, Khabarovsk Krai, and many other parts of Russia. In Taganrog, gas stations have run out of fuel.
It's a complete collapse. No gasoline at all. I drove to 5 different stations. Some only serve customers with coupons. What is this? The Soviet Union all over again?
Here's the 11th station. No gasoline. The 12th one, only diesel and gas. No gasoline anywhere. All the stations are completely empty.
In Primorsky Krai, long lines are forming at local gas stations.
All these people are waiting for fuel, but it looks like there isn't any. Not at all.
Gasoline is disappearing even in European Russia, for example, in the Republic of Mariel.
There's no regular 92-octane gasoline. So, what have they achieved, huh? Our so-called oil and gas superpower can't even provide fuel for its own people.
Gas stations across Russia have been idle for weeks. There's simply no fuel.
The situation hasn't changed. No premium fuel, no 95, not even 92. No gasoline in Belgorod.
Nothing here either. And nothing there.
Some gas stations have shut down completely. People's nerves are at their limit.
I really need gasoline, and at 11 a.m. it's going to be absolute chaos. There'll be kilometer-long lines for fuel, and I'll end up with nothing. How am I supposed to stay calm?
Where gasoline is available to everyone, not just with coupons, endless lines of cars stretch for kilometers.
Unbelievable. Look at the number of cars lining up for gasoline. It's insane.
Some Russians, after waiting in line for hours and finally managing to buy fuel, are now reselling it on social media, at auction, for prices many times higher than at the gas station.
How much for a liter of gasoline?
220 rubles per liter.
Why such a price?
Personally, I drove to Terny this morning to get it. Lost time, a tire, and my own gasoline, hence the price.
Gasoline has become worth its weight in gold. People are practically fighting for it at gas stations. It is already being stolen directly from parked cars.
This isn't the first car I've seen with the fuel cap open. Someone must have siphoned the gas.
Supply disruptions began to occur even in Moscow.
Do you have 95? No? This is already the 4th gas station today, where I've tried to fill up with 95-octane gasoline. None of them had it.
Across Russia, gasoline prices are steadily rising. Even the numbers on the scoreboard are changing so fast that it's hard to keep up with them.
Gasoline prices are rising again. We don't have any oil in Russia. That's why prices are going up. Soon, 92-octane will probably cost 100 rubles. There's no end in sight. And some people promised that there would be no price increases.
To slow down this growth, the Kremlin had to impose a ban on fuel exports. Oil companies were also tacitly prohibited from significantly raising retail prices. But even such restrictions are not helping. In the Russian-occupied territories of Luhansk and Donetsk regions, gasoline prices have already soared by about 30%. But at many gas stations, there is no fuel available, even at higher prices.
In short, the 95 is practically unavailable. And where it is available, it costs 80 or more.
When it arrives, the lines at gas stations are much longer than in Russia.
A line at a gas station on the edge of town.
And this is already a problem not only for the civilian population, but also for the Russian military, especially since the Ukrainian army is systematically destroying oil depots and fuel and lubricant storage facilities in the territories occupied by Russia. And also attacks trains carrying fuel for Russian units across occupied territory. The Russian army is experiencing a growing fuel shortage. Even the so-called Zet military correspondents are writing about this.
The issue is critical regarding the military. There's no military gasoline either. Soldiers refuel at public stations and pay out of pocket because the enemy has destroyed many depots and military fuel stations.
The logistics of Russian troops are suffering. There is not enough fuel to deliver necessary supplies to the front lines: ammunition, weapons, drones. Problems arise even with the delivery of water and food.
Just imagine the blow we would deal if we took out an oil refinery for a month or two. Therefore, from a military point of view, this is an absolutely legitimate target.
Putin is simply unable to provide air defense coverage for all oil refineries, oil depots, and fuel depots in Russia and the occupied territories. This is because it would require weakening the air defense of military facilities, such as command posts and ammunition depots. The Ukrainian army is not only targeting oil refineries.
We can strike at others, and you know, it's like a game of thimbles. Try to guess where it will land next. When talking to the military, to senior officers, they emphasize that today we have volumes of targets that are subject to destruction, being within the range of both Western and our own weapons.
Russia is a huge country, and this is not only its advantage, but also its weakness.
It is physically impossible for it to cover all of its objects. For us, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of targets that we can work on.
But Putin has other priorities: defending himself. Most of the air defense systems are located around the Kremlin. There are also quite a few in the area of his residence in Valdai. 12 air defense positions have already been identified there. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military is striking targets associated with the Russian oil industry. After each strike by Ukrainian defense forces on another oil refinery or oil depot, the activity of Russian troops decreases. They are forced to take a break. Over time, the effect of such strikes will only intensify. Russian oil refineries are burning. Gasoline production in Russia is declining. It is now impossible to export fuel. On the contrary, it has to be purchased from Belarus. In other words, instead of earning money, the Kremlin is spending it. Oil production in Russia fell by 30,000 barrels per day in August. But even so, Russia is beginning to drown in its own oil. It has more than it can refine into gasoline or sell at a reasonable price. Therefore, they have to offer large discounts just to get rid of it. The main buyers are India and China, and they, knowing about Russia's problems, are twisting Putin's arm, demanding constant price reductions. And Putin has nowhere to go. Ukraine is also striking at oil transportation routes to prevent Russia from exporting as much as possible, thereby reducing its revenues even further. The Ukrainian army struck an oil pipeline in the Bryansk region, as well as the Vtorovo oil pumping station in the Vladimir region. Two ports used for transporting oil by tanker across the Baltic Sea were also hit. An oil terminal caught fire in the port of Ust-Luga. In the port of Primorsk, a pumping station, 2 berths, and 2 oil tankers were damaged. After the strike, this port temporarily suspended operations. Due to Ukrainian strikes, Russian oil exports have fallen sharply. Accordingly, revenues from oil and oil product exports have also fallen significantly. To a 5-year low, in August alone, they decreased by $920 million, according to data from the International Energy Agency. This means that Putin has fewer and fewer petro-dollars to spend on the war. His military machine is getting weaker every day. Russian oil refineries are now being compared to Koshchei's needle, that mythical weak spot through which an immortal evil can finally be defeated. After every successful strike on another refinery, the commander of Ukraine's drone forces, Robert Brovdy, writes, "Koshchei's needle has weakened, thinned out by yet another few percent, indicating how much of Russia's total oil processing that refinery accounted for. Each time," he repeats, "gasoline is turning into a scarce liquid, and oil into something that burns out fast." If the attacks on Russian oil refineries continue, the Russian economy will collapse. There will be no income from oil, and there will be nothing to cover the enormous costs of the war. Even Russian propagandists are already talking about this.
We warned that this would lead to economic collapse. We are running out of money, which means there is a limit to this strange military operation. Forget it. There is no money for this. Because if we pile on costs like this, well, that's it. We're done for. Our lifeless corpse will be found among mountains of new weapons.
Zet military correspondents are in a panic. There will be more strikes on oil refineries, and they will become much more powerful. Ukraine is increasing the production of long-range drones, and it is doing so in cooperation with its European partners. Germany has allocated 300 million euros for the purchase of drones that will strike deep into Russia.
There will be no restrictions on long-range weapons. Ukraine will be able to strike military targets outside its territory.
The UK will also provide assistance. Over the next year, it will finance 1,000 long-range drones, according to the UK Defence Minister, John Healey, at a Ramstein meeting. In addition, Kyiv is establishing joint drone production with France.
We are working on joint production opportunities with Ukraine.
Denmark has also launched its first joint drone production line.
And such lines will also be opened in other European countries. This is a very important direction for us.
The European Union as a whole will allocate an impressive sum of 6 billion euros to Ukraine for the production of drones. These are credit funds financed by income from frozen Russian assets.
Enter into a drone alliance.
We will form an alliance with Ukraine on UAVs. Ukraine has ingenuity. Now it needs scale, and together we can provide that.
Ukraine's military capabilities will grow, and not only because of drones. The US has decided to transfer ERM ammunition to Ukraine, which is a hybrid of a cruise missile and an aerial bomb. In addition, Kyiv is actively developing its own missile program. Flamingo and Long Neptune will probably also be able to strike Russian oil facilities. All this is causing real panic in Zet networks. Here, for example, is what the author of the pro-war channel UATV writes. Kyiv has started strikes on fuel and energy infrastructure, refineries, and pipelines. Soon, powerful Flamingo cruise missiles will join the drones targeting these sites. The author of the Zet channel then draws a very apt analogy, apparently without even realizing that he is comparing Russia to Nazi Germany. Here is the exact quote. This is reminiscent of May 1944, when the Anglo-Americans began air raids on Germany's gasoline production plants. If the Ukrainian armed forces missiles fly thousands of kilometers, it will turn the tide of the war.
What could really bring Putin to his knees is Western Siberia. If at some point Ukraine can defeat Russia, it will be this oil hub in Western Siberia. If you look at a map of all the oil and gas pipelines, there is a point where they all originate. And if Ukraine puts this heart of the Russian economy under fire control, sooner or later, this argument will be decisive.
Russian oil refineries are under attack from Ukrainian drones, and oil is under attack from Western sanctions. The European Union has lowered the price cap from $60 to $47 per barrel. This means a ban on transport services and insurance if the price exceeds the set limit. Russia supplies its oil to India and China by tanker using the so-called shadow fleet. Old ships that sail without insurance under the flags of third countries. And there are a huge number of such tankers. According to the New York Times, there are almost 1,000 of them. That is 1 in 6 of all tankers in the world. This shadow fleet is a large-scale scheme to circumvent sanctions. For it to work, the Kremlin has to pay ship owners dearly. What's more, India and China are well aware of the price cap and the toxicity of Russian oil, and are again putting pressure on Russia to offer even bigger discounts. Because of this, the Kremlin is losing a large part of its profits. But the tankers used by Russia violate not only the sanctions regime, but also environmental safety rules. After all, they are often in poor condition and could sink at any moment, leading to a large-scale oil spill, and they pass through the territorial waters of European Union countries. European countries have every reason to stop them.
These are old vessels, 20 years old or more, which simply pose a real danger of environmental disaster. They have no insurance, they have nothing.
The sanctions will take full effect when the shadow fleet is stopped.
Enough sanctions have been imposed. Now it's just a matter of controlling them. And when these tankers simply stop arriving in Russia to be loaded, that's when it will get interesting. That's when there will be a problem.
Donald Trump is also trying to hit Russia's oil revenues by putting pressure on India. He raised tariffs on India to 50% for buying Russian oil, thereby financing Putin's war.
They don't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine. Because of this, I will be substantially raising the tariff paid by India to the USA.
India is profiting from Russian oil. After Russia invaded Ukraine, New Delhi sharply increased its purchases of oil from Russia. This was stated by the United States Secretary of the Treasury.
If we look back, we can see that before 2022, before the invasion, less than 1% of India's oil came from Russia. Just 1%. And now it's 42%. So India is simply profiting from this.
But India, after the introduction of a 50% tariff by the US, did not stop buying Russian oil. Instead, it began demanding even bigger discounts from Russia as compensation. The discount has already reached $10 per barrel. Once again, Putin has nowhere to turn. He has to sacrifice part of his profits. And tankers from Russia continue to sail to India. Russian oil is used to produce gasoline in this country at numerous huge refineries. And then it is sold, including to European Union countries. This is a scheme to circumvent sanctions. The EU has banned the purchase of Russian gasoline, but it buys fuel from India that is produced from Russian oil.
In essence, this undermines Europe's efforts to bleed Russia dry and deprive it of its income.
The EU has already begun to address this issue. Sanctions have been imposed on a Russian-owned company that owns India's largest oil refinery. As a result, it is no longer permitted to sell fuel to EU countries. However, despite this, exports of diesel fuel from India to the EU, for example, continue to grow. Some EU countries continue to buy Russian oil. These are Hungary and Slovakia. Donald Trump accused Europe of not being tough enough on Russia. He stated that the US would impose its own sanctions against Russia and countries supporting it only when European countries set tariffs against China. Very high tariffs, ranging from 50 to 100%. There is another condition for Trump to impose new sanctions. He demands that all NATO countries stop buying Russian oil.
They buy oil from Russia, so we can't be the only ones working at full capacity. I am prepared to impose sanctions, but they must strengthen their sanctions in line with what I am doing. Well, I am prepared to move forward, but they must do so too. I think they will. But so far, they are only talking and not acting.
But Hungary and Slovakia are unlikely to give up Russian oil. And Turkey, also a NATO member, buys it and has no intention of giving it up. Trump's demands are impossible to meet. This means that the US will not impose sanctions. This was reported by the influential American newspaper, The New York Times. Following the US president's statement, the European Union presented its 19th package of sanctions against Russia. There is no mention of a complete rejection of Russian oil. However, it proposes a complete ban on transactions with Rosneft and Gazprom Neft. It also proposes adding 45 Russian and foreign companies, as well as 118 ships, to the sanctions list. This package of sanctions is nowhere near as tough as Trump demands, but even in its current form, the document has not yet been adopted. All 27 EU member states must vote on it. For now, Ukrainian drone attacks remain the most effective measure. They have already been dubbed kinetic sanctions. Or explosive sanctions. The blows against the Russian oil industry will continue.
The most effective sanctions are those that take effect most quickly. These are fires at Russian oil refineries, terminals, and oil depots. We have significantly restricted the Russian oil industry, and this significantly restricts the war.
Putin is obsessed with war. The destruction of Ukraine and further aggression against Europe is his idée fixe. He will not give up on this.
Only weakening Russia and depriving it of its ability to wage war can stop the dictator. To achieve this, Ukraine must be supplied with modern weapons, and tough economic sanctions must be imposed on Russia. There must also be constant strikes on Russian oil refineries, oil depots, and pipelines. Only this whole set of measures, taken together, will work.
Because it shows the Kremlin that there is no prospect of continuing the war. That victory for the Kremlin is impossible.
But Putin is still far from acknowledging this fact. The dictator remains confident that he will be able to wage war until the end of his life. Attacks on oil facilities and gasoline shortages are driving inflation. Russia's economy is on the brink of recession, as even his top managers are reporting to him. But Putin just brushes it off.
German Gref states the Russian economy is stagnating. Do you agree with this?
No.
But Putin won't be able to keep denying it forever.
The economic sector, the financial sector, and business are simply exhausted, because it is already clear that the consequences are truly dire. The consequences are dire, but officials simply cannot come and tell their dictator, the president who has lost all credibility, that, because of your war, your adventures and sanctions, our economy is collapsing. For some reason, everything is already in recession, and civilian industries are falling apart and becoming unprofitable, and we simply have a fuel shortage. They are afraid to say it, but they are indirectly conveying it to some extent. They always have funeral faces at all meetings, wearing mourning masks, as if they were at the funeral of the economy. Gradually, from different sides, cuckoos are cuckooing in the morning, in the evening, at night. And accordingly, he is forced to acknowledge the problems in the economy.
Putin is only slowly beginning to realize that spending so much money on the war is no longer possible.
We plan to reduce defense spending.
Oil at $110 per barrel, as it was in the first year of full-scale war, will no longer be available. The price has fallen by almost half, and it may fall further. The European Union will gradually, though not immediately, abandon Russian oil completely. The goal has been set for 2027, and Ukraine will continue to strike Russian oil refineries, oil depots, and pipelines. Because of this, Russia is preparing for an even greater reduction in oil production. This development is unavoidable, and Transneft has already warned oil companies about it. They themselves have already faced a sharp drop in profits this year.
Look, Rosneft has already reported that its net profits for the first half of the year have fallen more than threefold. Lukoil's profits have fallen by half. Surgutneftgaz is sitting on a loss of more than 500 billion rubles for the first half of the year. And the cumulative loss of oil and gas companies is more than 700 billion rubles. In other words, the oil industry has become unprofitable.
Just a few years ago, losses for Russian oil and gas companies seemed unthinkable. Now, it's the new reality. And with each passing month, the situation in Russia will only worsen. Strikes on Russian oil refineries and sanctions against Russian oil are depriving Putin of the ability to continue the war. There is less and less money for it. Economic problems will only grow. Oil has fed the monster known as the Putin regime, enabling it to churn out military equipment and missiles, and to hire hundreds of thousands of mercenaries under contract, who can be thrown into meat grinder assaults. It gave him a false sense of confidence that he could disrupt the world order and remain unpunished. But oil will also destroy this regime. Without petrodollars, Putin is nothing. And those petrodollars are running out. If long-range strikes and sanctions intensify, Putin will have few options left. Either end the war or condemn Russia, and himself along with it, to complete collapse. Maxim Urlapov, Special Report.